First of all, before we get started, we need to dink it and sink it.
That's not a thing, Scott.
Ketone IQ for the win.
It's all downhill from here, as they say on the trail.
Thanks for joining another edition of Trail Runner Nation. My name is Scott Warr.
And I'm Don Freeman.
We hope that today's episode does not turn you off from the podcast. It's a little bit different, right, Don?
Well, Scott, if it doesn't turn out, it's not going to go any further than you and I.
We may not release this one. We were just thinking, we were on the trail this morning. Don and I were taking Monday, Martin Luther King Day off. We decided to go out for the trail run, and we had a discussion that was so interesting to two of us that we thought we should do an episode on it. And maybe as you're listening to this, you may have some thoughts, you may have some feelings, you may say, you know what? I've thought of that.
And so, Scott, we actually didn't have the conversation. We put a pause on it. And we said, hold it for the podcast because this is a thing I'd like to discuss once, not twice.
Yeah. So I think it was you that brought up the question. What was the question initially, Don?
Well, the question was, what if that day you decided to be a runner? What if your decision was the opposite? I'm not going to run. I'm not going to do that. Fast forward through your running career, and we all have running careers. Where would we be without that day, without that hinge point, that deciding moment that I'm going to start running? Where would we be today?
Right. And that hinge point was not, I want to be a runner or I don't want to be a runner. The hinge point could have been, you never even thought about being a runner, right? But we all have. If you're listening to this and you've laced up a pair of shoes and moved a little bit faster than a walk or a shuffle, you're a runner. And where would you be if you didn't make that decision? And so where did we start there, Don? Was it, I think I started and I said, boy, I think I would have probably been in the gym a little bit more. Maybe I had a little more definition, but I guarantee you I'd probably be a little heavier and maybe not as happy.
True. And I thought back to the moment that I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and saw that my stomach and my chest had changed places. One moved up and one moved down. And I said, who is this guy looking back at me? I got to do something about this quick, because if I forecast this journey, it's not going to go well.
So you're saying that the top was a little softer and the bottom was a little bit harder?
Something like that, Scott. Read into it what you will. That's the day that at least the choice to get out and run changed for me, and I didn't know anything about it.
So if you've listened to Trail Runner Nation, you kind of have heard some of, as I have for many years, where Don was invited or was told by a friend of ours, hey, let's go run this 50-mile race, which happened to be the American River 50-miler. And Don said, no human can run that far. And then our friend said, well, they have a finisher's jacket. And Don said, I'm in. But his journey to being a runner started way before that. Tell us a little bit about when and how you decided to be a runner. Where was your hinge point?
Well, first and foremost, since these shows are never about Scott and Don, we really invite the listener to be the third person in this conversation or the guest on the show. Because as we were kind of exploring this on the run today, we thought, everybody out there has that moment, has their hinge point. So, we encourage you to think about these questions coming at you, not just Don's answer, but when was your time? And maybe we can compare. Maybe you drop a show note. Do they do show notes, or do you do the show notes?
I do the show notes.
They could make a comment and they could tell us their story, because I'm more interested in their story than my story, because I already know mine.
Yeah.
But I do know that when I did check that mirror out and I saw that the two parts of my anatomy had changed places, and I said, it's time for me to run. I know maybe I was running from that mirror, Scott. I don't know. But I started running and I thought I had set the world's record for distance. Now I had to work up for it. There was a lot of 2-mile runs and 3-mile slogs. And all those until I reached the pinnacle. What I thought was
The
absolutely
world record distance.
World Guinness Book of World Record. I better look it up because I think I just did it with an 11-mile road run. I'm certain that was further than anybody had ever run. And I looked down at my knee, which was healthy until I did that run, and it looked like it had swollen up like a grapefruit. And I said, well, obviously that's further than man should run.
You're a chiropractor, and so you thought if someone runs that far and puts that kind of stress and your body responds in that way, that's your body saying that's all you should do.
Stop doing it. That was my professional opinion, and as it turns out, it didn't stay there long because, as we spoke in the past, probably our most repeated guest, Jeff Abel, who is a great dear friend of ours, that had said in the hallway, hey, Don, I'm training to do a marathon. In fact, I just did one, and I was just trying to be congenial. I said, oh, Jeff, I'd always wanted to do a marathon. And he called me out, and he said, well, great, let's start training. And I thought, oh, great. Well, I like this guy, so, I could try to do a run. After all, I've run 11 miles in the past. And that's how it all started for me, Scott.
That was the hinge point. At what point did you decide that you liked running?
I had
how far down the road?
I'm still waiting. No,
that I know that's wrong, because
that's true.
Because I on our run this morning, you probably said it no less than 3 times. So glad I'm out here. This is beautiful. We are so lucky.
And it really does come down to that. What would our lives been like if we could forecast into the future? If we did not decide that one day I'm going to be a runner, we figured that there's some physiological benefits, right? We talked about a waistline that started to compete with the chest line. And then we thought, there's more than just physical side of this. There's also the psychological side. There's a mental side. We always talk about that, but that gets woven completely throughout all the decisions and the way that we approach the world and pass the world on to the next generation. And that there also is a community based, all the friends that we come across and that we know, whether it's virtual or in real on the home trails, when you run across somebody and you say, hey, how you doing? Our lives have changed tremendously because of the decision, because of that one hinge point.
And I want to jump back to the mental side. I think there's 2 subcategories in the mental side. There's the mental toughness side, us overcoming, the pain and the suffering and the body saying no, but the mind saying yes. But then the thing that I really appreciate to this day is the psychological mental side, the break. What did we call that? You said a good word this morning about reducing anxiety, the calm and the peace that comes from going out on the trail run. And that can be whether you're running with a group, a friend, or even solo. You're alone with your thoughts. And I thought back, because I've been trying to get back to the gym a little bit more now. And years ago, in a younger days, I was a little bit of a gym rat. And the times that I go to the gym now, I don't get that relief mentally at the gym because of my own self. And that is, between sets, as I'm resting, I pull out my phone and I look at emails and text messages and whatever else. And so I'm never alone with my thoughts like I am on the trail.
Scott, why don't you just leave the phone in your gym bag with your keys to your car and just go back in and work out?
That would be very easy, wouldn't it, Don?
Oh, well, yeah, I'm a problem solver, my friend.
Yeah, I don't know why that is the case, but when you go for a run, even though I take my phone with me, I'm not looking at it because you gotta pay attention. That's probably one of the advantages to trail running is, boy, you can't be looking at your phone when you're running down the trail, or else you're gonna have a scab from your chin to your forehead.
And your friends won't let you. It's like, what are you doing? Stock trades over there, War? What's happening? Come on, put it away. We got work to do.
I think the answer to your question, where would I be if I didn't fill that hinge point?
Hold that spot, because this morning This is as far as we got
Yeah.
on our
Yeah.
conversation this morning. And you brought something up besides just leaving the cell phone in the locker room, was it televisions?
Oh yeah, that's right. In a gym, I don't know if you guys go to the gym, but in the gym I go to, there are probably 15 to 20 TVs on the hanging down from the ceiling, and each of them has a different channel on. So I can learn how to make Quiche Lorraine,
Mhm.
I can see CNN, I can see C-SPAN, I can see Sally Jesse Raphael. I don't even know if she's still on TV. I
I
can
don't even
see
know what it
Judge
is.
Judy, cartoons, and so there's constant interruption, constant stimulation, and so it's really hard to have that mental break, that peace,
Escape.
that
The mental
escape. I
escape.
think that's the word. That's the word you used this morning. The escape from our busy lives, and I think that's probably one of the greatest blessings that I receive, and I'm grateful for the hinge point when I started running because that means a lot to me right now.
Anybody listening can identify with this and join in the conversation, and we'll pause. We'll listen. We need that. As that, how long does it take you to get out? How many steps down the trail before now you have escaped? You've left your car, you've left
Mm.
the trailhead, you've hopefully left some of those nagging problems that stick with you throughout the day because you haven't solved them yet. And your body and mind is working on that solution. But getting on the trail somehow that takes priority. And it's not because the level of difficulty, it just becomes so different. You're removed from the day to day in and day out strife that life sometimes hands us.
I'm going to say it's changed for me.
Mm.
Years ago when I was first starting, it would take me at least a mile to find that zone, that Zen zone, if you will.
Scott, I'm going to interrupt
Yeah.
you and say it still takes the same amount of time.
No, that's how long it takes before I start running.
Well, got it.
But I get to that zone now much sooner. And in fact, if you're familiar with the Auburn area, we usually start from the Auburn Overlook Park, which is near the Western States finish. And there's a trail that everybody runs there, and there's a water trough, and that's about there or down to the first right hand turn. It's not that far, maybe 100 yards. I can get in that Zen zone now much quicker.
And I think it really speaks to finding someone you're compatible with, that you love showing up
Mm-hmm.
to. I know many times if you said, "Hey Don, there's no way I can make it. I'm just jammed. There's no way I can get out there." That would become a new obstacle or a hurdle for me to get past. Well, Scott's not there. Maybe that's a day off for me. So I think our running partners hold us accountable.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that there's that mental escape that is a benefit. I also think that there's well, actually, before we move on from that mental escape, you mentioned something that I really liked, and that's escaping from the problems that we're dealing with in life. And sometimes you can escape from those problems, but I think more times than not, especially on a solo run, well, not necessarily, sometimes with a partner that you can trust. And there's the old saying, what is set on the trail stays on the trail.
Mm-hmm.
But you can work through those problems on the trail without interruption. And when you're running alone, you can think of different solutions. Maybe different solutions come to your mind that you never thought of because now you're not interrupted by life. Or if you're running with a partner, maybe you can share some of those problems. It's a therapy session. Could be a therapy session.
I think is because I think that may be because our ability to think through things without the ego getting in the way, without excuses being in front of them, saying, "Well, here's why it's happening." It's not you; it's that other person or that other condition that really drove this outcome, and you're not protecting yourself when you're out there and you strip all of the ego from it. You start to hear things differently and see things differently, and I think that may be part of it.
Another aspect that is you're talking about that just I thought of was it comes back to the community part that you mentioned. There are people that we run with that if we weren't running, there would be no reason at all for us to be in the same social clique, right?
Mm-hmm.
People of different financial means, experience ranges, age ranges, experience in life ranges that we would never ever meet or have the ability to learn from. And sometimes those people can help us with some of these problems, whether
True.
they're personal problems or I think where I've had a lot more fun out on the trail are business problems that we have, and being able to get someone else's view that has more experience in business or whatever to chime in, right?
And that's where we do it on the trail. But I've got to speak up for all the, the knitters out there and the quilt makers. They have their community and they're solving
Sure.
problems. They're doing they escape too. So, finding a good passionate activity with good people, I think is part of humanity. And that's what makes everything work.
The other day, I was listening to a podcast with Simon Sinek, who's one of our favorite authors, that authored the book Starts With Why, that Don and I read probably, 12, 13 years
Yeah.
ago when we were just getting started. And it was an ethos for how we have grown this podcast. But he was having a discussion with this psychologist, manager of a long-term data set, 750 people starting in, I think it was 1932. And they were looking and measuring happiness and longevity. And so every year, or maybe it was even more frequent than that, they measured and asked these people questions about their happiness and their longevity. And one of the things that was a common thread among those that lived longer and happier was having a community larger than a few friends. And I think that's one of the great things that we can find on the trail is a community that can help us look at things from a different point of view, look at things from a different angle, and to teach us, and we can learn from them.
One thing, Scott, I don't know how many people even watch this, that we do this on YouTube, but it was very telling. And I hope people have caught on to this about you. When you start to reference some facts and your eyes go up in the air and you start searching the corners of the room for answers, I don't know if I can really trust your stats.
It may be making it up.
I think the path is right on the money. I think there's two ways to get to your destination. So your point is well taken. It was articulated well. I'm just questioning the numbers that you bring. 1932, 750 participants.
Yeah,
these things
you're
make
a good
me
listener.
wonder.
You're a good listener. I have to say that something, I'm sure you didn't coin the phrase, but you say it all the time. Don't let the facts get in the way of a good story. So I believe in that.
Oh, I borrowed that from Rick Nelson, but I passed it on to you because it fit you better than it fit me. There's another thing that you brought up that I think is interesting to talk about, and I thought that's the one you were going to mention when you said the podcast, was that make decisions today and make efforts. Yeah, tell us about that one.
So one of the things that they found of people that lived longer and happier was, and I'm paraphrasing this, is basically physically taking care of your body physically and staying in good shape, is to think, what do I want my body to be, or how do I want to feel when I'm 100 years old? So if you're 30 years old and you have, as Don was saying, a reversal of your chest and gut, do you want to have that physical form when you're 100 years old? If you don't, you need to start today with the discipline to build the body that you want when you're 100. And I think that is a really, really unique perspective that can help motivate us and help us to get out the door and be more disciplined.
I think it helps me lace up a pair of shoes to think of it that way, not to think, well, this is to keep that 10 pounds off that I've been fighting, or this is because there's a race coming up that I want to get, or I want to do this so it's, because it's part of my lifestyle and I like getting out there with Scott. But it's also an investment for year 99 if we're
Right.
lucky enough to make it that far. How do we want to walk around at 99? And these little contributions or deposits into our life account, I think add up.
And I think your mom is probably the perfect example of this, right?
Yeah, Joel,
Tell, tell
she's
us a
been
little bit about your mom, Don.
well. I didn't know the conversation was going this far, but my mom is very active. She's 82 and she works out. She's holding classes in her own. She converted her bedroom into an exercise studio like she had when she owned a gym, and she's just loving it. She takes care of herself, takes care of the dogs, going out and doing things. She's just an active woman, and I think that genes are part of it, but mindset is the other part to get out there and just keep going, and it pays
Yeah.
off.
She's going to be an in shape 100-year-old,
Well,
right?
yeah, and I hope I'm able to see it because that woman just keeps on going.
So let's talk about what kind of physical things. Where would you be physically, Don, if you didn't answer that hinge point question of get out and run?
Well, I think the fact that I did look in that mirror and I saw the reversal of abdomen and torso, my chest there, I think that I would have done something because that made me ill to look at. I said, "Oh, I've got to do something." It just the something happened to be running, and so fortunate.
Why was it running? Because you were a gym rat. I've seen photos of you that all bulked up like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Why did you decide running when you had experience in the gym?
Boy, that's I knew I needed to burn cardio. I just knew I needed to burn calories. I just needed to get out there and move, move, move. And I knew if I moved that I'd have to spend calories and I would get rid of some of the extra weight. And I went with that.
Okay.
Back in the day when I was bulking for size, it was eat as much as you can. I would wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and have a tuna shake, a can of tuna in a blender with some apple juice on it, and then I'd knock it down, or some raw kefir. And I am not a milk dairy drinker, but I'd get up and have raw. It's like liquefied yogurt. Oh boy, I don't know why I did it, but I wanted to grow, and so I did it. So that's where I came from. So I thought, eating more isn't the solution. I need to do something to trim this extra insulation. And so I think that's why running. Why did you start running, Scott? Why did you?
Wait. I have one follow-up question.
Great.
How long did it take you to get your body back into something that you were pleased with when you looked in the mirror?
I like that question, and I want to answer it this way: is I became more infatuated with the process than the outcome.
Ooh.
I just dug in and thought,
golden nugget alert right there, pal.
Yeah, it was the process, not the outcome. And so the outcome was secondary, and it just happened, but it didn't matter. I just liked the challenge, and then I ended up running into people that I liked.
Yeah, that's a golden nugget there. It's all about the process. If we were working on the outcome or the end, we probably would stop at some point, right?
Right. So what was your decision to start running? And then I want hopefully other people to think about what was your moment, what was your hinge point. But tell me about your hinge point, Scott.
I also at one point didn't like how my pants were fitting, and I fell back on the gym because in high school I did a lot of weightlifting and that made me feel good, and I was in good shape then. So I started hitting the gym, and there was a new Gold's Gym that was opening, and I got in at the rock bottom level before they opened. I got such a good rate, which was probably 3 times as much as I should have been paying, but I got in on the ground level, and I started going back to the gym, and of course, there were 2 things. One, I would always get warmed up on the treadmill to get the blood going, and I remember there was a lady that was always going to the gym about the same time as me, and she was always in the same treadmill right in front of me, which was good motivation. And she would be on that treadmill running before I got to the gym. I would run for like 10, 15 minutes, and then I'd go lift weights. And then, I'd be there 45 minutes to an hour. and I left and she'd still be running on the treadmill. So she was on that treadmill for over an hour. And I would, as I got to know her, and I never approached her, of course, but the more I got to know her and see her, she would run like it was natural and free and effortless. And so I was always intrigued by that. But then our common friend Jeff, he of course was an ambassador for our sport, right? He was always getting people out on the trail. And at some point, I decided when I was in my 20s, I wrote a list of things I wanted to accomplish or do before I died. And one of them was run a marathon. And he was the only runner I knew. And so I asked him if he'd train me for a marathon. And that's how mine started. But I will say that growing up, I played football, hated running, hated running. Um, when I first started, because Jeff didn't want to run with me until I got to a certain level of proficiency, I went to the local sports store and bought a pair of running shoes that were way too expensive. And afterwards, I found out they were a piece of crap running shoes, but I got them. They looked nice. They had these little shock absorbers in them. That
Oh
anyway,
yeah.
um, and so I went out the first day and I decided I'm going to go run down to the end of the block, which is about a mile and a half, and then run back. And I went and I probably went about a half a mile, and I had to double over and I was breathing hard. And mind you, I was in pretty good shape because I've been going to the gym for about a year and a half, 2 years. And I was, in a good weight class. But I pulled over and I just breathing hard. And then, okay, so I walked a little bit and then I ran a little bit. And that probably took me about 3 or 4 weeks before I could run down to the end of the block, a mile and a half, turn around and run back without walking. And I hated every minute of it. Hated it, hated it, hated it. But I made a commitment I was going to run this marathon. And it took me probably 6 months before I really enjoyed running, where it seemed like it wasn't hard, where my lungs weren't burning. And so I think that if you're out there and you're starting to run and it's not easy and it's not fun, you're not alone. I think that's normal. But if you commit yourself, it gets much, much easier the longer you keep going out day after day after day.
And I've said in the past that if it's hard, you're doing it wrong. You can be easy. You then back off, go a little bit slower, change your pace, shorten your stride. Whatever you have to do, it doesn't have to be hard, because you can't do something hard for, hours and hours and hours. It just doesn't match. And so, backing off, slowing down can be a good thing, but it doesn't mean that it can't be hard. You can do hill repeats. You can do, some speed work on a track. That's going to be hard stuff. But if everything is bending over and huffing and puffing, slow it down. It'll speed up. It'll catch you up. All you have to do is put some time in.
So let's go back to, where would you be? We talked about the mental escapism. What about the mental toughness thing? Where would you be on a mental, I'm going to say control, mental control, your brain control? Where would you be if you weren't a runner or a distance runner?
Well, I think you become, and this is just off the cuff for both of us. We
Yeah.
didn't have this conversation today, and this answer I'm hearing for the first time. So I think that, and I probably shouldn't have delayed there because I think my thought went away. Where would I be? I think some of these things that we're going through, and I've thought about this as I'm out there, is really preparing me for what's next, what might be hard. And that might be, what a sickness or an illness. I've got to tune into my body. I've got to know what it can get through. I've got to know when things are pushed that I can push back just as hard. And I think all of these experiences of working through some of those hardships have prepared me for the ultimate hardship that I think that we all, I think, inevitably visit at some point. And I feel like I've done my work. I've done my homework.
Yeah, um, I think that I've learned that I'm stronger than I thought I was. So if I did not become a trail ultra distance runner, I don't know whether I would have the confidence in myself to continue past when things got hard, not just mentally, but or physically, but even emotionally. I think that that's one of the things that I've benefited from. Um, and I'm trying to remember what is the word that we learned from. Ryan, you're gonna have to edit this out. What is the phrase where if you're on a treadmill and you can't run anymore, and then you're told run 5 more minutes?
Yeah.
What is that called? What's that?
Do another 5. I don't know what it's called.
It's the central governor. Central
Okay.
governor. So that's what we're talking. I think that I learned about the central governor, that your body may be telling you to quit, but your mind can be stronger than your body. And in knowing that you have the confidence that your body can continue beyond what your body's telling you, if that makes sense. I think that's one of the huge benefits that I get from my quote, I'm quoting, air quoting now, career in running.
Yeah, we're on this episode. We're all allowed, even those at home, to use air quotes on, because we all have careers. And as you were saying that, I was thinking the reason that I've been able to push past that point, and all of us, is because there was no option. You're halfway out. You've got to get back. Boy, you feel like quitting. It's hot. You're thirsty. You don't have fuel. You've got cramps. I'm halfway out from my car. I have to get back. How many times in life do you have to get back? There's not a lot. There's a lot of times you can just bail out and just lay down, or go over to a garden hose and suck on the hose and look for shade. We don't have to get back. But when you're out there and the sun is going down, you don't have light with you. It gets cold at night. You have to keep going. You have a personal schedule at home because you have to work the next day or pick up your kids or whatever it is. You have to get back. And that's where I think you really learn what you're made of, when you have to, and you just don't get to pull the cord and say, I'm done.
And I think for me also, the phrase "this too shall pass," it was learned in trail and ultra running. We all have, or many of us have gone on these really long runs where you think you're gonna die. You're cramping up, you're throwing up, and you think, I'm at my end's rope. But if you continue and persevere, maybe slow down a little bit, but you continue to the next aid station, more times than not, you can come out of it. You can be resurrected and you continue. And I think that lesson is invaluable to me, that if I'm in a business situation or a personal relationship or life situation that is hard, just keep plugging away and hopefully it will get better. It will resolve itself and things will be easier.
So as I listened to you, I listened to you say that, it occurred to me, well, there are many places in life that can apply to. It could be someone in business that just keeps pushing on it and keeps going. Financially, they're stringing it together. If you stay with it long enough, you can get through it. Same thing with relationships, and same thing with just about anything that you can describe. You get to work through that. And I think these are life's lessons that are handed to us in a variety of ways. And for us on today's conversation, it's about trail running. But I imagine you could find this common thread through humanity.
Yeah, I think that's right. What about physically? Did we talk about where we'd be physically without running?
Well, we'd be much heavier, that's for sure. I'd have a different a wardrobe for sure. We had said that I would have looked at that transformation of the belly up top and the chest down below, and thought, well, I couldn't tolerate that. I'd find something. Luckily, I found trail running in the trail community to help hold it together. But if that didn't occur to me, if I didn't, where would I be? I would be heavier. Yes, I have a family history of my dad had a heart attack at 41 years old, which happened to be the same year I ran Western States.
Wow.
You figure. So I made the decision, I've got to do something different, right?
Yeah.
Because you follow your DNA.
Mhm.
and either both of your parents or one of your parents. So I was probably making some decisions about that. So I
Yeah.
think maybe I may have been looking completely different and have a different medical record at the doctor's office.
Tell me this. Do you think you would be eating the same way if you didn't run? Like right today, would you be eating the same and have the same relationship with food that you do now because of running?
That's a hard question. Sometimes we select our fuel because we're recovering, or because we select something because we have a run tomorrow and I don't want to eat this double sized piece of carrot cakes. I don't want to carry that on tomorrow. So I think there are some changes in diet.
Yeah.
But I think I was, take it from the guy having a tuna shake. I was tuned in to food's important, right? And what
That's
you
right.
put
You
in
already
is what you get out.
you already were already eating well. I think that there is, and maybe when you were younger, I always heard, I think it was Jimmy Dean Freeman says, I run because I want to eat these
Right.
things,
Yeah.
and I can eat anything because I run. And I think maybe when I was younger, that was true. As I've gotten older, that's not true. And one of the benefits of this podcast has been learning from good nutritionists to learn what is the right things, what is the right fuel to put in your body. And I think I am eating better because of the things I've learned, not only with my experiment of what works for me, but also learning from nutritionists that are saying, if you want to be a runner, if you want to be an athlete, if you want to have a high performing body, you need to stay away from these things and you need to eat more of these other things.
Well, there comes a point in your life when you're younger, you can get away with anything. I mean, Ryan that edits this will hear this and then hear that we spoke about him. I think that guy could eat 2 pizzas and knock it back with a liter of Coke and be just fine. I would gain, 3 times whatever calories I put in just as punishment. So there becomes a point in your life, maybe when that same transition from chest to belly and belly to chest, that's probably about the same time that correlates with you can't eat anything you want. Yeah, go have seconds or thirds. Hey, there's some extra something here on the table. Why don't you just have Ryan eat it? He'll eat anything. He can eat anything.
Hey, Mikey.
And now
Yeah,
you're dating yourself,
yeah,
1974.
that was a fallback for those of you who are older. You'll get a good chuckle out of that phrase. Um, what do you think about, and maybe this is even a tougher question, but spiritually, do you get something spiritual out of running?
I remember watching a documentary, and maybe some of you have watched it too. I can't remember which it was, but it was showing some Native American that was running and started a race and talked about that the time that he spends running is prayer time and listening to
Mm.
his foot plant on Mother Earth and having it speak back. It was very spiritual, his approach and the way that he took running. And so I identified with that, and it really had a lot of impact when I watched it, and I thought about it often. I think there is some spiritual time out there when you're with Mother Nature, as close as you can get to what it looked like back in the day. And we get a chance to see that. There's a lot of people that grow up in suburbia or in a concrete jungle that never see it. But we get to visit what it looked like many, many, many years ago.
Yeah, if you're listening to this and you're lucky enough to have a trail nearby, I think, in fact, Don and I this morning, someone on our typical loop, or one of our typical loops, created a bench
Mm.
on this overlook that overlooks the American River Canyon. And it was recently that they put this in. And Don and I were on a run. We were actually finishing up the run. We had like maybe a tenth of a mile left before we got to this. And I said, "Hey, did you see this new bench somebody put in here?" And Don, being a good guy, says, "Hey, let's take a look at this." And we both went and sat down on that bench and we overlooked the American River Canyon. And it was just a beautiful day today, probably about 55 degrees, sunny. a little bit of a nip in the air, and just sat there and was grateful for the ability we have to be out there and to enjoy Mother Nature. I mean, I think that's a spiritual gift.
You say it's because I'm a nice guy, Scott. We passed that same bench going downhill, but I didn't suggest that we stop on it. We are coming up
Our
a
heart
tough
rate was
climb.
much higher on the way up.
That's right. That's true.
What other things do you get out of running, or that you benefit from today that you wouldn't have if you said, I'm going to be a runner?
Well, one of the first things that comes to mind are all the great friends that we've encountered. I mean, some of the best people that I've had a chance to meet, and I know they're in all different communities, but they're in this community, the one that I'm in, and people that have shared misery, that have solved problems with me, that I've communicated and shared joyous moments, and these would not have happened had I not been with that group. I've said early on, Scott, when we started, I said the trail qualifies her members.
You mean early in the podcast, not this episode, but
Right,
this was,
right.
15, well, not 15, 13 years ago. And you've said it probably 24 times or more.
Yeah, people don't listen, so I get to repeat. The trail qualifies her members.
Repetition is good. It's like a hill repeat.
Yeah, that's right. So take a win for the team here. That the trail qualifies her members. The people that complain, the people find it too hard, they drift away, they don't come back. But when you get somebody that's been through the grind, that's slogged through the miles, that have been in the pain and made it back to the car and show up again the next day, those are the people that are, I think, salt of the earth. Those are the people that I want to commune with because I know what they're made of, and
Yeah.
I know I can trust them. And I do know if something happened to one of us, any of us out there, that there would be a line of people looking to help, whatever it was. It's like, say no more. What time? Where do I go? What do I bring? I'll be there. Do I need a light? I mean, that would be the last question.
I like that, but let me put a little bit of a twist on that. The trail does qualify, but it does not discriminate.
True.
So it doesn't matter your body shape, your sex, your hair color, your eyebrow length.
Ryan, take care of that.
Eyebrow length. Yeah, that's funny. It's funny to me.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that the trail does not discriminate. You can go out there and enjoy the trail regardless, and everybody is welcome. What you mean is only those with the right attitude, and that attitude can be learned. You could be one of those people, and maybe I was, selfish, egotistical, narcissist jerk, but the trail can calm that or can reshape that attitude.
I think that was part of the original statement. As I'm thinking back on it, maybe I'm just wishing that it was that the trail does define its members. It qualifies and makes sure that you have the ability to get out there, that you have the desire, that you're consistent, that you're determined to finish. Yes.
Yeah.
But anybody can come out, like you said, one, come all. And when she's done with you, you'll be amazed at the changes in who you are and how you're perceived by others. Not in a way that they wish they were you, but they can recognize a good character person, a person with good character.
Can you think of a specific time, Don, where the trail humbled you? And while you're thinking about that, I'll mention the one that I'm thinking of for me. It was a training run, middle of the summer, Northern California. It was hot, 100 plus degrees Fahrenheit. And I had gone out. I don't know how long of a run it was, but I was coming back and I was still probably 2 miles away from my vehicle, the end of the run. And I was done. I had bonked. I had no strength in my legs. no desire to continue running. And I sat down on a rock and I'm by myself. And I can even remember where that rock was. And I sat down and I just wallowed for a minute in my pity and thinking, this is hard. I do not like this. I am not in a good place. If a helicopter could be called to come pick me up, even though I'm only 2 miles away from the end of my run, I would call that helicopter and pay them pretty much whatever price to come get me. And I remembered that helicopter's not going to come. No one is going to come. And I need to get off this rock and move. And the movement was not fast. It was very slow and it was hard. And I remember getting back to the end of the trail, the end of the run. And even though I felt really bad, I had accomplished something. And I thought that I wouldn't have gotten unless I went for that run today. So rather than thinking it was a failure of a run, I was thinking, boy, I learned something today.
Your question to me was, I love that story. Your question to me was, have I been humbled on the trail? Oh, countless times. And I appreciate the trail's patience, because
Yeah.
it's taught me the same lesson over and over again. It's like, we're going here again, Freeman. All right, here we go. I taught you this last time, but we're going to have to remind you.
You'd have to be taught multiple times, Don.
Well, obviously, because I can recount similar problems over and over. So I think that's why.
Tell me a specific story. Can you think of one?
Oh, I 4 came into my brain, and it is that moment where I sit down on a rock, and and it's maybe the ants coming up my leg, and I say, well, when it gets to the knee, I'll start getting concerned. It was it was those type of things that you just take it to the very end, and just sitting down is a luxury. And it's like, I've given myself the chance to sit. But those sitting moments when you're collecting yourself, trying to get the courage to get up and and move on, those are lessons too. And that's when you find out. I've said it in the past. If you want to find out who you are, do something hard, and you'll spend time with yourself, and you'll learn what you're made of. And you've got to do that. Please don't exit life without doing something hard to find out how incredible you really are.
Yeah. How lucky are we that there was a hinge point that took us down this trail, metaphorically trail,
Yeah.
and realistic trail. That was pretty deep right there, by the way.
That was deep. If it was a river, I would be wading. That was not something you tread across the bottom. And I think everybody listening to this can hopefully identify this is a conversation between the two of us and the listeners, because we know, because it's our community, that we all fit, and somebody could drop in right now and pick right up, and it would feel like it was seamless because we've all shared in these experiences.
So if you're having a solo run and you're listening to this, think about yourself. Where would you be if you didn't have that decision, or that to lace up the shoes for the first time? If you're listening to this while you're driving, use it as a jumping off point for your next trail run with your friend or your running group. Ask them, where would they be without this community, this sport, this thing that we're so lucky to do.
Well, I agree with you, Scott. I'm glad that we didn't finish the conversation on the trail today, so we weren't trying to reproduce something. This was just as organic as it could be. And we even considered not doing it because, as we say often, but who wants to listen to anything we have to say? Why would we even do that? Isn't it somewhat arrogant to go on and just talk about, our experiences through our quote unquote career? But I think what we're doing is just sharing a piece of us with a piece of you. And I'd love to go on a run with each and every person listening, as long as you don't promise not to go too fast up the hill. I would love to have this conversation.
If this is your first time listening to this podcast, rest assured, other episodes have great guests.
Yeah, that's right.
And if this is your you've listened to many episodes and this one wasn't your cup of tea, it's not going to happen very often or at all.
Well, Scott, so the options were, because we're up against a hard stop for this week, for reasons that we could have either not released an episode, which is not us, because we would like to have consistency, and we don't want to take.
We're disciplined, Don.
We're disciplined. That's right. Because the trail has shaped us. We're not providing a repeat of something that was recently done, because we know you know how to rewind and find a repeat somewhere in the archive, so you could do that. Or we could take a chance and do this. And it's what we chose.
Yeah. I enjoyed the conversation as we started this morning, and I even enjoyed putting it on pause and then hitting the play or the record button again as we've gone through here, because it makes me realize how lucky we are. We're so lucky to be able to be fit enough or have the
Health
physical ability, the health to do what we do, and to enjoy the community like we do. If you're out there and you're listening to this and think, I don't know if I can be a runner, yes, you can.
And if you're going through one of those low spots, rest assured, things can get better. Just keep pushing on through. Maybe redefine what success looks like depending on what you're dealing with. But this too shall pass. This is what we learn through the trails, and it is a microcosm of life. So let the trail guide you, and enjoy the community, enjoy the sport.
And run
Mas.